All right, folks, let's talk about concrete. Look at the upper portion of this wall as I scroll through the image here, and you can see how much texture and shadows and highlights that the camera grabs, or that the light grabs in a photograph like this with this same technique I'm going to share with you here. This, believe it or not, is only acrylic washes. That's it. It looks so deep and like there's so many layers of texture to this, but there's not. As we zoom in, you can see it still looks like there's so many layers of texture to this. If you ever looked at old aged concrete, you know, it has all these layers of staining and whitewash and different grays and darks and shadows with different patterns. I'm going to show you how to do this in the video, and it's really easy to do. So let's get going. On XPS foam, I went ahead and used, I textured it first with some aluminum foil, then I spray painted it. If you haven't seen the video on how I spray paint XPS foam, I'll link that in the description of the video and up in the right hand corner of the frame. So once you get your foam spray painted, I'm just using some Walmart apple barrel inexpensive acrylic paints. I'm going to, and you can use whatever colors you want. I was after an aged kind of concrete, so I used whites and grays. But you can add browns in there. You can use light blues, whatever you want. Anyway, mix these up in a container of water. You can see how much water was in there, and you can see how much paint I put in. I'm not looking for anything thick. It just needs to be a really thin, watered down wash. That's all this is. And we'll increase the strength of the wash later by adding more paint to it. If you find that your wash is too strong to begin with, add a little water to it. There's no scientific method. You're either going to add more water or you're going to add more paint. We're going to get a sponge. You can use different kinds of sponges. This is a tile grout sponge. It's a really finely poured sponge, and I like it. You're just going to dip it into your whitewash. And here you really want to have puddles and pooling, not uncontrolled dripping all over your counter and your workstation. But as you see here, we just want some puddles on there. We want those puddles are the key to how this is going to work. Dab that all on there, and it looks really intense right now. But as we dry it with the heat gun, and you can use an air dryer or you can just let it sit and dry. The purpose of those pools are this patterning right here. As soon as those pools dry, they leave behind a hard edge. They leave behind a pattern where it evaporates, and these patterns are what we want, because as we use our washes later and build up over the top of each of these layers, we're going to be leaving different intensities of patterns on the XPS foam. And so that's going to create the illusion that there's just so many layers of old concrete on here and old texture. It's just really I've never been able to really pull off concrete like I wanted to. And so I shied away from doing concrete and in turn did stone and brick. But you know, there's products on the market for making concrete texture on your diorama. But this here, what's so exciting about this is it's only paint. It's only washes. And it creates, in my opinion, a much better look than something you might buy. The ones that you buy, you know, are great because they add a real texture to it. And this over the top of those products, this method I'm showing you here over the top of those products really enhances the way they look. But if you saw the gray that I did here, all we're doing is going back in with that light gray and knocking back the intensity of the white. And same thing, we're leaving pools in just random spots on the board. And what that does is when it dries, it creates these recesses looking areas, but they're not recessed. It's just varying intensities of the washes that we're using. That's what's so incredible about this. We're going to darken it up a little bit now that I've got it. Basically, I've got the white knocked down where I want, and I want to go ahead and darken some of these areas up a little. We're just going to go ahead and add a little more gray paint to the mix, to that water, and this is going to darken it up. Or actually, that might be, is that more gray or black? At one point, I add a little black to it. I can't remember. I think that's gray, and feel free, you can use whatever color washes you want. You can go in there with a really watered down brown, and you can stain this up, man, and just have a good time with it. And I'm going to tell you, the one reason that I use spray paint as a base coat is because I'm using so much water here. I don't want to take the chance of a base coat being acrylic and it begins to wash off. Now, you can use acrylic as a base coat, but if you do, seal it with a Mod Podge after. Get something on there that's going to create a seal on there to prevent all the water from washing off the acrylic layers below it. That's why I use spray paint. But if you're not comfortable spray painting XPS foam, then by all means, go with what you know and use the acrylics. And a good Mod Podge will, a good coat of Mod Podge will coat that and seal it for you. So here, all we're doing is, like I say, between each layer, we're going to put that heat gun on it and dry that up. If you've got time, let it sit, go about your household chores, get your honeydews done, come back to it after it dries, or you can be like me and just hit it with the heat gun. Now look here, we've got all this texture going on. Look at how many layers. I mean, that looks really deep. It looks like there's actual texture been applied to this board, and all it is, once again, is just watered down paint. It's how you put it on, and I'm showing you these areas here because I like to go in and I like the patterns that are being created there. I'm going to go in with some more white and knock it back down, bring it back up a little bit and add a little bit more on top of the gray to break up some of the edge that once the water evaporated, it left an edge I didn't really like as much, so I'll go back over that with just the very tip of the sponge and get a little more detailed with the stipple that I do on the with the sponge. See, I'll just use the very corner, just a very little bit of water, and I'll go around the gray where when the water evaporated, it left an edge that I didn't like so much. So we'll just knock it back out a little bit with the whitewash, and that's all. Try not to get drips on the board like I did there. If you get some drips, just stipple over them. But isn't this an incredibly easy method to create concrete? Why didn't I know this before? And I've experimented and tried different things, and I like using a product that's in a jar for certain things, but I want to be able to create something like this inexpensively and easily, and I never have been really satisfied with any process that I've tried before, and I've thought about this a lot, believe me. And this method here just works so great. And one day I just sat down and really took my time, and I watched how the water and the paint and everything dried and reacted, and I'm like, you know what, man? And I really put my head to it, and I'm not saying I came up with this technique, but it's something that I'm really excited about, and I discovered for myself one day. And I'm sure there's variations of this that other people do. I don't know. I haven't seen anything before that didn't use a product from a jar or something like that. And there's nothing clear about washes and creating textured concrete look using washes on YouTube. I haven't found anything, and so I'm pretty excited to share this with you. If there's something else out there, certainly share that with me, but this just looks really incredible, and it's so easy to do. Keep that heat gun moving on there, dry those areas up, and it looks intense when you first do it, but as it dries, the intensity goes right down and it just becomes real subtle and it looks really nice. And if you got too much white on there, knock it back with a little gray. If you got too much gray in an area, knock it back with a little more watered down white. That's the whole idea of making these washes really, really weak and putting them against a super dark gray background of the spray paint, is they really stand out on there nicely, and it's easy to control. And that makes it fun. You know, you can't go wrong with this. You can't really mess this up. And so that's what's exciting about this. And this is a scrap piece of foam that I had messed up one day. And so I decided to do this concrete effect on there for this tutorial. And so don't worry about the tile marks down below on there. I'm going through with a paintbrush, and I'm just stippling random patterns and blobs and spots with the paintbrush to create sort of different. If you've ever looked at a concrete wall, you'll see, or a stucco wall, you'll see little shapes and faces and clouds and different things that, you know, different patterns in there that make up the wall from all the random edges over time that have been exposed, or different coats of paint that have been laid on before and things like that. And so that's what I'm doing here. I'm just going through and making some random little patterns and creating years of age and wear in a matter of moments. It's the magic of diorama building, right? It's fun like that, and it's a way to just enjoy your day. And you know, this technique it doesn't get cheaper than this. I mean, this is absolutely the most inexpensive that you can do. And like I say, it's just right on top of XPS foam that I hit with an aluminum foil ball. I don't texture it real deep on this because I don't want it to come out looking like stone, or sometimes if you make your effects too big, they begin to look comical with an action figure and like a sort of cartoony background or a cartoony looking prop. And so I try to really minimize the amount of, or the depth of the indentations from the aluminum foil on here, and just making it really shallow passes, real light passes with the aluminum foil ball, so that my, you know, all the crevices aren't deep, because then it begins to just look kind of cartoony. So we're going to add some black here. I knew I would at some point, and darken this up a little bit. And now this is really cool. I'll go through with a sponge, and I'll just paint on random spots and shapes and patterns with the sponge, and you'll see it creates a really randomized looking bit of texture on the wall. And you'll see next time you're driving down your neighborhood, or you're in some warehouse, take a look at an old concrete wall from an old building or something, and you're going to see stuff just like this on there. And it's just so full of old texture that, you know, it just looks really cool. And when you add something like this to your diorama, it's you're going to have a good time with it. Just make whatever patterns I feel are necessary. Kind of feather out some of the edges. If they look a little too smooth or too big, then I'll go back through and I'll stipple with I got another sponge that I'll use over here in a bit. It's a really wide poured, a big poured sponge, and it has really big holes in it, and I'll use that and do a little stippling with that too. And like I say, this lessens in intensity as I dry it with the heat gun. And you can use a hairdryer also. Keep that thing moving so you don't melt your panel. Another thing too, but with all that, you know, nice, cool, watered down paint on there, it doesn't melt too quickly, but it will. So keep that thing moving. And, you know, this was a dial panel that I don't want to say messed up, but, you know, it had a couple errors on it that I didn't intend to have on it. Something like this, though, if you've got an old dial panel that is messed up or you think is not what you wanted, I guarantee you can bring it back to life with this technique right here. you can cover up so much and breathe new life into an old junky dio panel by simply turning it into a concrete piece. It's like you can hide a lot of flaws and errors just by making something rusty. It's the same thing, turn it into concrete, man. And then that covers up a lot of little errors that you might be the only one that ever noticed, but this is a great technique to make an old boring panel into something cool. Look at that. Look how awesome. I mean, that really looks like there's an upper layer and a bottom layer and layers in between. I mean, that really looks like you went through with stucco, broke it open and exposed concrete behind the stucco. There's just so much depth going on right here, and it's all because of the way that the water evaporates on the foam board. That's the whole trick to this, is making your washes light enough and then darkening them up and drying them. That's the whole trick to this, is the way that water evaporates. And that's all it is. And when you're done, you can go through and put a sealer on here, like a Mod Podge sealer or something like that, to seal this up when you're finished, to protect those washes on there so they don't get scratched up or scraped up as you use your dio panel or whatever you guys do with them. But that's what I do. I use an aerosol Mod Podge on there, a matte aerosol Mod Podge. That stuff is fantastic, man. But once again, if you're not comfortable with something like an aerosol on your XPS foam board, then just go with a matte Mod Podge, the original, pasty Mod Podge. And I say matte because if you put gloss on here, I guarantee you when you go to do your photography with this, you're going to be angry because you're going to have uncontrollable highlights that you didn't intend on having, and now you've got some issues. So use matte. That's my advice. Look at that. Gosh, that's awesome. From acrylic paints from Walmart. That's all that's on this board. Beautiful. And you can just add, other products like streaking grime and grime coming down from some of those recessed areas and drips. You can just build on this base, this base piece right here. You can take and just really tweak that out to creating, rusty spots, broken bits of rebar poking out maybe. I mean, you can really just add to this. This is a great place to begin to make some really incredible walls for your diorama. And you can go on like this all day. Add some rust color in there. Put some broken pipe on there. I mean, it's just so fun. But hope you guys like this technique. If you haven't done so, like and subscribe also. Get me on all the social media platforms, Instagram, TikTok, Etsy, Facebook. I'm on all those places. So like and subscribe, and let's take a last look at this as we scroll through and look. Remember, there's no texture here. It's all acrylic paint washes. That's all it is. It's an illusion, and it's pretty incredible when you think about it that way. It's just an illusion. Take care, folks.